Spiritual Laws. Ralph Waldo Emerson. The living heaven that respects your prayers, is both house and architect, that chisels the discarded hours of man, and builds with them eternal towers, unique and self-composing works. He fears not the days that undermine, and grow by decay, by the famous power that lurks in reaction and recoil. It makes the flame freeze and the ice boil, forging through the sour arms of offense, the silver seed of innocence. When the act of reflection takes place in the mind, when we look at ourselves in the light of thought, we discover that our life is ambushed in beauty. As we go on, all things assume pleasing forms, as well as clouds to the eye, not only the familiar and stale things, but even the tragic and terrible, are beautiful, when they take their place in the images of memory, the river bank, the grass, the water's edge, the old house or the foolish person. However neglected they may have been, they all have a grace in the past. Even the corpse that has remained in the chambers, has given a solemn adornment to the house. The soul will know neither deformity nor pain, if in the hours of clear reason, we were to speak the sternest truth. We would say that we had never made a sacrifice. In these hours, the mind seems so great, that nothing can be taken from us that seems much. All loss and all sorrow are particular, the universe remains to the sound heart, and neither vexations nor calamities abate our confidence. No man has ever declared his sorrows as lightly as he could. Exaggeration must be allowed, on the most patient and sorrowful horse that ever was led, for only the finite, that which has toiled and suffered, the infinite has already stretched itself out in sound repose. Intellectual life can be kept clean and wholesome, if man lives the life of nature, and does not introduce to his mind difficulties which are not his own. No man need be perplexed in his speculations, let him do and say what is strictly his own. Even if he be very ignorant in books, his nature, he will not produce intellectual obstructions or doubts. Our young people are sick, with the theological problems of original sin, the origin of evil, predestination, and the like. These have never presented a practical difficulty to any man, they have never obscured the path of any man, who has not gone out of his way to seek them. They are the mumps, measles, and whooping cough of the soul, and those who have not contracted them, cannot describe their health, nor prescribe their cure. A simple mind will not know these enemies. It is another thing, if it be capable of giving an account of its faith, and expounding to another the theory of its self-union and freedom. This requires uncommon endowments, though without this self-knowledge, there can be remarkable strength and integrity in who he is. Strong instincts and simple rules are enough. My will never gave the images of my mind the rank they now have. The regular course of study, years of academic and professional education, have given me no better data than some idle books under the bench in the Latin school. What we do not call education is more valuable than what we call so. We do not form an idea the moment we receive a thought of its comparative value. And education often wastes its effort in attempts to frustrate and hinder this natural magnetism, which is sure to select what belongs to it. In the same way, our moral nature is vitiated by any interference of our will. People represent virtue as a struggle, and boast much of their achievements. And everywhere, it is questioned when a noble nature is praised, whether the man who struggles with temptation is not better. But there is no merit in the matter, either God is, or he is not. We love characters, insofar as they are impulsive and spontaneous. The less a man thinks or knows his virtues, the more we like them. The victories of Timoleon are the best victories that ran and flowed, with the verses of Homer, said Plutarch. When we see a soul whose deeds are all regal, gracious, and pleasant as roses, we should thank God, that such things can be and are. And not turn sourly to the angel, and say, Cromwell is a better man with his ill-tempered endurance, and his native devils. Not less striking, is the weighting of nature over will, in all practical life. In history, there is less intention than we attribute to it. To Caesar and Napoleon, we attribute profound and far-sighted plans, though the best of their power was in nature, and not in them. Men of extraordinary success, in their moments of honesty, have always sung, not to us, not at us. According to the faith of their times, they have erected altars to fortune, or to fate, or to Saint Julian. Their success lay in their parallelism with the course of thought, which found in them an unobstructed channel. And the prodigies of which they were visible conductors seemed, to all eyes, to be their own work. The threads generated galvanism. It is even true that there was less in them to rest on, if we compare them with others. As the virtue of a pipe is to be smooth and hollow, what outwardly appeared to be will and immobility, was will and self-annihilation. Could Shakespeare give a theory of Shakespeare? Could a name of prodigious mathematical genius convey to others some idea of his methods? If he could communicate that secret, it would instantly lose its exaggerated value, mingling with daylight and energy, the power to remain and to depart. These observations teach us forcibly, that our life could be much easier and simpler than we make it, and that the world could be a happier place than it is. That there is no need for strife, convulsions and despair, for wringing of hands and gnashing of teeth, that we create our own evils badly. Let us not intrude on nature's optimism because we can always gain that advantage, from the past or from a wiser mind. In the present, we are able to discern, that we are engendered with self-executing laws. The face of external nature teaches us the same lesson. Nature does not want us to worry or be angry. It does not like our benevolence, nor our learning, any more than it likes our frauds and wars. When we leave the assembly, the bank, the convention of abolition, or the temperance meeting, or the club of transcendence, to the field and the forest, she says to us, so heated are we, full of mechanical actions, that we must meddle, and do things in our own way, till the sacrifices and virtues of society are odious. Love should make joy, but our benevolence is unhappy. Our Sunday schools, churches and poor societies, are punishments for the neck. It pains us to please no one. There are natural ways of arriving at the same ends to which they aspire, but they do not arrive, because all virtue must work in the same way. Because all must give dollars. It is very inconvenient for us peasants, and we do not believe that anything good will come of it. We have no dollars, the merchants will give them. They, the peasants, will give corn. The poets will sing and the women will sew. The laborers will lend a hand, and the children will bring flowers. And why drag this dead weight of a Sunday school over all Christendom? It is natural and beautiful, for childhood to inquire and maturity to teach, but it is time to answer the questions when they are asked. Young people should not be locked against their will on a bench, and forced to ask questions for an hour, against their will. If we look more broadly, everything remains the same. Laws, charters, creeds and ways of life, seem a travesty of the truth. Our society is burdened with a heavy machinery, which resembles the endless aqueducts, which the Romans built over hills and valleys, and which have been surpassed by the discovery of the law, that water rises to the level of its source. It is a Chinese wall, which any nimble Tartar can leap over. It is a standing army, not as good as peace. It is a graduated empire, titled and richly named, quite superfluous when it is found that the municipal boards respond equally well. Let us draw a lesson from nature, which always works by short ways. When the fruit is ripe, it always falls. When the fruit is dispatched, then the leaf falls. The circuit of the waters is a simple fall. The walk of man and of all animals is a forward fall. All our manual and power work, such as digging, splitting, rowing, etc., is done by continually falling. And the globe, the earth, the moon, the comet, the sun or the star, fall forever and ever. The simplicity of the universe is very different from the simplicity of a machine. He who sees moral nature through and through, and knows thoroughly how knowledge is acquired and character is formed, is a pedant. The simplicity of nature is not that which can be easily read, but that which is inexhaustible. The latter analysis cannot be made intelligently. We judge the wisdom of a man by his hope, knowing that the perception of the inexhaustibility of nature is immortal youth. The wild fertility of nature is felt by comparing our rigid names and reputations with our fluid consciousness. We pass in the world by sects and schools, by erudition and piety, and are all the time children of the breast. One sees very well how Pyrrhonism grew. Every man sees that he is that middle ground, where everything can be affirmed and denied, with equal reason. He is old, young, very wise and totally ignorant. Hear and feel what you say, about seraphim and tin salesmen. There is no permanent sage, except in the invention of the Stoics. We side with the hero, as we read or paint, against the coward and the thief. But we ourselves, have been that coward and that thief, and will be so again. Not in low circumstances, but in comparison with the possible greatness of the soul. A little consideration, of what happens around us every day, would show us that a law superior to that of our will, regulates events. And that our painful labors are unnecessary and fruitless, that only in our easy, simple, spontaneous action, we feel strong, and being content to obey, we become divine. Believing and loving, a believing love, will relieve us of a vast burden of care. Oh, my brothers, God exists. There is a soul at the center of nature, and above the will of every man, so that none of us can wrong the universe. He has so infused his strong enchantment into nature, that we thrive when we accept his advice, and when we struggle to hurt his creatures. Our hands stick to our sides, or we beat our breasts. The whole course of things serves to teach us faith, and we have only to obey. There is a guide for each of us, and humbly listening, we shall hear the right word. Why must you so painfully choose your place, your occupation, your associates, your modes of action and entertainment? Certainly, there is a possible right for you, which excludes the need for balance and voluntary choice. For you, there is a reality, a place and duties right with genius. Place yourself in the midst of the current of power and wisdom, which animates all who float, and you will be propelled effortlessly towards truth, towards right and towards perfect satisfaction. Then you put all adversaries in error. Then you are the world, the measure of right, truth and beauty. If we did not go with our miserable interferences, work, society, letters, arts, science and religion, then men would live much better than they do now. And heaven predicted from the beginning of the world, and still predicted from the bottom of the heart, would be organized as they do now the rose, the air and the sun. I say not to choose, but it is a manner of speaking, by which I mean to distinguish what is commonly called choice among men. And that it is a partial act, the choice of the hands, of the eyes, of the appetites, and not a complete act of man. But what I call right or goodness, is the choice of my constitution, and what I call heaven and inwardly aspire to, is the state or circumstance desirable for my constitution, and the action to which in all my years I tend, is to the work for my faculties. We must consider, that a man susceptible of being reasoned, in the choice of his daily trade or profession, is no excuse for his acts. The fact that it is the custom of his trade, what has it to do with a bad trade? He has no vocation in his character. Every man has his own vocation, his own talent. There is a direction, in which every space is open to him. He has faculties which invite him to endless effort. He is like a boat on a river, which faces obstacles on all sides, except on one. On that side, all obstructions are removed, and you sweep serenely over the channel deeper and deeper, into an infinite sea. This talent or this calling, depends on your organization, or the way the general soul is embodied in it. It bends to something that comes easily and well to you when you do it, but which no other man can do. He has no rival. The more truly, he consults his own faculties, the more difference his work will exhibit from that of any other. His ambition is exactly proportional to his powers. The height of the pinnacle is to the breadth of the base. Every man has this call to power, to do something unique, and no man has any other call. The claim that another has a different vocation, a vocation by name, personal choice and outward signs, which mark him as extraordinary, and not in the list of ordinary men, is only fanaticism. And it betrays obtuseness, to perceive that there is only one mind in all individuals, and no respect of persons in it. In doing his work, he makes himself feel the need he can supply, and creates the taste he enjoys, by doing his own work. It unfolds by itself. The vice of our oratory is that it is not abandoned somewhere. Not only every speaker, but every man should let go all the reins. He should find or make a frank and sincere expression of the strength and sense that is in him. The common experience is that man adapts himself as best he can to the usual details of that work or trade into which he falls, and deals with it as a dog turns a spit. It is then a part of the machine which moves man, and he will be lost until he succeeds in communicating with others in all his stature and proportion. He will not yet find his vocation. He must find in it an outlet for his character, so that he can justify his work in their eyes. If the work is mean, let him by his thought and character make it liberal. Whatever he knows and thinks, whatever in his opinion is worth doing, let him communicate it to men. They will never know him nor honor him rightly, and he will always take the meanness and formality of what he does, instead of making it the dutiful spirit of his character and ends. We only like actions which have already been praised by men for a long time, and we do not perceive that anything man does can be divine. We think that greatness is bound or organized in certain places or duties, in certain offices or occasions. And we do not see that Paganini is capable of extracting ecstasy from a cactus, and Eulenstein from a Jew's harp, or a boy with nimble fingers, from scraps of paper with his scissors. What we call obscure condition or vulgar society, is that condition in society, whose poetry has not yet been written, though it will shortly be as enviable and renowned, as any in our estimations. Take an election of kings, the parts of hospitality, the connection of families, the impressiveness of death, and 1,000 other things. Royalty makes its own estimation. A royal mind will habitually make you create a new estimation. That is elevation. What a man gets, what does it have to do with hope or fear? In himself is his strength, let him regard no good as solid, but that which is in his nature, and which must come out of him as long as it exists. The goods of fortune may come and go, like the jewels of summer which every wind scatters, like the momentary signs of its infinite productiveness. The genius of a man may have his own, the quality that distinguishes him from all others, the susceptibility to one kind of influences, the selection of what suits him, the rejection of what does not suit him. It determines for him the character of the universe. Man is a method, a progressive ordering, a principle of selection that gathers his fellows wherever he goes. He takes only his own from the multiplicity that surrounds him. He is like one of those feathers, which are placed from the banks of rivers, in order to catch driftwood, or like a lodestone, among the splinters of steel. The facts, words, and people that remain in his memory, without his being able to say why they remain, because they have a relationship with him no less real for being still ungraspable, are the symbols of value for him. Because they can interpret parts of his consciousness, for which he would in vain seek words, in the conventional images of books, and other minds. What attracts my attention, he will have it, as I will go to the man who knocks at my door, while 1,000 such worthy persons pass by, to whom I pay no attention. It is enough that these individuals tell me of some anecdotes, of some traits of character, of manners, of face, of some incidents. They have an emphasis in your memory, out of all proportion to their apparent importance, if you measure them by ordinary standards. They have to do with your gift. Let them have their weight, and do not reject them, nor look for illustrations in the reading. What your heart considers great, then it is great. The soul's emphasis is always right, upon all things that are agreeable to its nature and genius. Man has the highest right everywhere. He can take what belongs to his spiritual state, and can take nothing else. Even if all doors were open, all the strength of men cannot prevent him from receiving it. So much in vain does he attempt to conceal a secret from him who has a right to know it. It will be said that the state of mind, in which a friend may lead us, is his dominion over us. He has a right to the thoughts of that mood. He can compel us to know all the secrets of the thoughts. This is a law that statesmen use in practice. All the terrors of the French Republic, which had Austria in trouble, were unable to master his diplomacy. But Napoleon sent to Vienna M. de Narbonne, one of the old nobles with the morals, manners and name of that interest. Saying that it was indispensable, send to the old aristocracy of Europe, men of the same connection, which in fact constitutes a kind of Freemasonry. M. de Narbonne, in less than 15 days, entered into all the secrets of the imperial cabinet. Nothing seems so easy as talking and making oneself understood. However, a man can come to find the strongest of defenses and bonds. And he who has received an opinion may come to find it the most inconvenient of ties. If a teacher has any opinion which he wishes to conceal from his pupils, they will become as indoctrinated in it as in any other he publishes. If you pour water into a vessel twisted into spirals and angles, it is vain to say, I will pour it only into this or that. You will find the level in everything. Men feel and act the consequences of your doctrine, without being able to show how they follow. Show an arc of the curve, and a good mathematician will discover the whole figure. We always reason from what is seen, to what is not seen. Hence the perfect intelligence which subsists among the wise men of remote ages. A man cannot bury his meanings so deeply in his book, but time and kindred men will eventually find it. Plato had a secret doctrine, true, what secret can he hide from the eyes of Bacon, of Montaigne, of Kant? That is why Aristotle said of his works, they are published and unpublished. No man can learn what he is not prepared to learn, even if the goal is near. A chemist can tell his most precious secrets to a carpenter, and the carpenter will never be the wisest. Secrets that a chemist would not tell for a farm. God always protects us from premature ideas. Our eyes, they stop so that we cannot see things, which stare us in the face, until the hour comes when the mind matures. Then we contemplate them, and the time when we did not see them, is like a dream. Not in nature, but in man, is all the beauty and value that the world sees. It is very empty, and is indebted to this golden and exalted soul. With all its pride, the earth fills its lap with splendors that are not its own. The valley of the Temple, Tivoli and Rome, are earth and water, rock and sky. There's land and water so good in my place, and yet how unloving the people are. No better for sun and moon, horizon and trees. As it is not observed that the keepers of Roman galleries, or the valets of painters, have elevation of thought. Or that the librarians are wiser men than others. There are graces in the behavior of a polished and noble person, which are lost. They are like the stars whose light has not yet reached us. We cannot see what he does. Our dreams are the aftermath of our waking knowledge. The visions of the night keep a certain proportion to the visions of the day. The horrible nightmares are exaggerations of the sins of the day. We see our evil affections incarnated in bad physiognomies in the Alps. The traveler contemplates, sometimes, his own shadow magnified in giant, so that every gesture of his hand is something terrifying. My children, said an old man to his children frightened by a dark figure at the door, my children, you will never see anything worse than yourselves. as in dreams, made the events just less fluid in the world. Every man sees himself in the colossal, without knowing that he is the same. The good, compared to the evil he sees, is like his own good to his own evil. Every quality of his mind is magnified in some acquaintance, and every emotion of his heart in some one. It is like a quincunx of trees counting 5, east, west, north or south, or an initial, middle and terminal acrostic. And why does he not adhere to one person, and avoid another according to his resemblance or antipathy to him, truly seeking himself in his associates? And furthermore, in his office and customs, gestures, food and drink. Just as the end comes to be faithfully represented, by every vision that is made of his circumstances. You can read what he writes. What can we see or acquire, if not what we are? Have you ever observed a skillful man reading Virgil? Well, that author is 1,000 books for 1,000 people. Take the book in your 2 hands, and then read to your heart's content. You will never find what I find. If any ingenious reader would have the monopoly of wisdom, or the delight he gets, he is as sure now that the book is in English, as if he were imprisoned in the language of papers. It is with a good book as a good companion. Introduce a vile person among gentlemen, he is useless. He is not his companion, every society is protected. The company is perfectly safe, and he is not one of them. Though his body be in the room, what is the use of fighting against the eternal laws of the mind, which adjust the relation of all persons to each other, by the mathematical measure of their possessions and beings? Gertrude is in love with Gay, who is tall, aristocratic, of Roman bearing and manners. To live with him would be life itself, and no purchase is too great, and heaven and earth are moved to that end. Now Gertrude has Gay, but, of what use to her now is the high, the aristocratic, the Roman of his bearing and manners, if her heart and her aims are in the Senate, in the theatre and in the billiard room? And she has no aim, no conversation to charm her graceful lord. She will have her own society, we can love nothing but nature. The most wonderful talents, the most meritorious efforts, are really of very little use with us, but the commodity or likeness of nature, how beautiful is the ease of her victory. We are approached by persons famous for their beauty, for their accomplishments, worthy of all wonder, for their charms and gifts. They deduce all their skill to the hour and to the company, with a very imperfect result, no doubt. It would be ungrateful on our part, not to praise them aloud. Then, when all is done, an insanely kindred person, a brother or sister by nature, approaches us so gently and easily, so closely and intimately, as if it were the blood in our own veins. We feel as if someone has gone, rather than another has arrived. We feel completely relieved and refreshed. It is a kind of joyful solitude. Foolishly we think, in our sinful days, that we must court friends, complying with the customs of society, with their dress, their breeding and their estimations. But she can only be my friend, that soul whom I find in the line of my own march, that soul who neither declined nor declines before me, but which, coming from the same celestial latitude, repeats in hers all my experience. The scholar forgets himself, and appeals to the manners and costumes of a man of the world, to deserve the smile of beauty, and follows some dizzy girl. A girl not yet taught by religious passion, to meet the noble woman with all that is serene, ocular, and beautiful in her soul, which is great. And love will follow. Nothing is more deeply punished, than the neglect of affinities, by which alone society should be formed, and the unhealthy levity of choosing associates, through the eyes of others. You can set your own rate. It is a maxim worthy of all acceptance, that a man may have the assignment he takes, occupy the place and attitude that is his due, and that all men accept him. The world should be fair, and let every man, with profound unconcern, set his own rate, hero or knave. He does not meddle in the matter. He will certainly accept his own measure of his doing and being, whether he slinks away and denies his own name, or sees his work produced to the concave sphere of the heavens, one with the revolution of the stars. The same reality pervades all teaching. Man can teach by doing, and not otherwise. If he can communicate, he can also teach, even if not with words. He teaches who gives, and he learns who receives. There is no teaching until the pupil is brought to the same state or principle in which you find yourself. A transfusion takes place, you are you, and you are him. Then it is a teaching, and by no unfriendly chance or bad company, you may lose the benefit of the whole, but your positions go out through one ear, as they came in through the other. We see announced that Mr. Grand will address the 4th of July, and Mr. Hand, before the Mechanics' Association, and we go there, because we know that these gentlemen will not communicate to the company their own character and experience. If we had reason to expect such confidence, we should have to go through all the inconveniences and oppositions. The sick would be carried on stretchers. But a public oratory is an evasion, a non-commitment, an apology, a gag, and not a communication, not a speech, not a man. Such a nemesis presides over all intellectual works. We have not yet learned that what is uttered in words is never affirmed. It must assert itself, or no form of logic or oath can give it evidence. The sentence must also contain its own apology for having been uttered. The effect of any writing on the public mind is mathematically measurable by its depth of thought. What amount of water carries the thought when it awakens, and lifts it from its roots with the mighty voice of eloquence? Then the effect will be broad, slow and permanent, on the minds of men. If the pages do not instruct it, it will die like flies in the hour. The way to speak and write that which will not go out of fashion, is to speak and write with sincerity. The argument which has no power to reach my own practice, I may well doubt it will not reach yours. But take Sidney's maxim, look to your heart and write. He who writes for himself, writes for an eternal audience. He can only share the affirmation he has arrived at, by trying to satiate his own curiosity. The writer who takes his subject from the ear and not from the heart, must know that he has lost as much as he seems to have gained. And when the empty book has collected all its accolades, and half the people say, "What poetry, what genius," it still needs fuel to make fire. Only what is profitable is profitable. Only life can impart life, and even if we burst, we can only be valued, to the extent that we make ourselves worth. There is no luck in literary reputation. Those who render the final verdict on each book are the partial and vociferous readers of the moment it appears. But a court like the one in Los Angeles, an audience that cannot be bribed, begged or intimidated, decides the title of one's fame. Only books worthy of enduring end up coming to fruition. Gilt edges, vellum, and presentation copies to all libraries will not preserve a book in circulation after its intrinsic date. It must go with all noble and royal authors, from Walpurgis to its destination. Apolloch, Blackmore, or Gotts may last a night, but Moses and Homer are eternal. There are not in the world, at any one time, more than a dozen persons, who read and understand Plato well enough, to pay for an edition of his works. And yet they duly reach each generation, on account of those few persons, as if they had even come into their hands. No book, said Bentley, was ever written by anyone other than himself. The permanence of all books is not fixed by any friendly or hostile effort, but by their own specific gravity, or by the intrinsic importance of their contents, to the constant mind of man. Do not worry too much about the light of your statue, said Michelangelo to the young sculptor. The light of the public square will approve of its value. In the same way, the effect of every action is measured by the depth of feeling from which it proceeds. The great man did not know he was great. It took a century or two for that fact to appear. What he did because he had to do it. It was the most natural thing in the world, and it arose from the circumstances of the moment. But now, everything he did, even raising his finger, eating bread, seems great. Everything is related, and it's called an institution. These are the demonstrations, in some details of the genius of nature. They show the direction of the stream, but in the stream of blood, every drop is alive. Truth has not a single victory. All things are its organs, not only dust and stones, but also errors and lies. The laws of disease, say the doctors, are as beautiful as those of health. Our philosophy is affirmative, and readily accepts the testimony of negative facts. As every shadow points to the sun by a divine necessity, so every fact of nature is bound to offer its testimony. Human character is always published, the most fleeting act and word, the mere air of doing a thing, the hinted purpose, are expressed in character. If you act, you show your character. If you stand still, or if you sleep, you also show it. You think that because you have spoken nothing when others spoke, and have given no opinion on the times, on the church, on slavery, on marriage, on socialism, nor on the secret societies, on the university, on the parties and individuals, that your verdict is still curiously expected, like a reserved wisdom. Far from it, your silence answers very loudly. You have no oracle to pronounce, and your peers have learned that you cannot help them, because oracles speak, and do not shout. Wisdom and understanding, give their voice in nature. Terrible limits are placed on the powers of dissimulation. Truth, tyrannized to the involuntary limbs of the body, it is said that faces never lie. So it is not necessary to deceive any man, who studies the changes of expression. When a man speaks the truth in the spirit of truth, his eye is as clear as the heavens. When he has vile ends, and speaks falsely, the eye is clouded and sometimes vitiated. I have heard experienced lawyers say, that they never fear the effect on a jury, a lawyer who does not believe in his heart, that his client should have a verdict. If he does not believe it, his disbelief will appear before the jury, in spite of all his protestations, and it will become his disbelief. This is the law, by which a work of art of any kind, puts us in the same state of mind, in which the artist was when he made it. What we do not believe, we cannot say with propriety, even if we repeat the words very often. Conviction is what Swedenborg expressed when he described a group of people in the spiritual world who were striving in vain to articulate a proposition in which they did not believe, but could not. Though they twisted and bent their lips in indignation, the man passes for all he is worth. It is a very idle curiosity, to know what others esteem of us, and no less so the fear of not being known. If a man knows that he can do something better than anyone else, he is sure that everyone recognizes this fact. The world is full of days of trial, and in every assembly a man enters, in every action he attempts, he is graded and trampled upon. In every troop of shouting and running boys, in every yard and square, a newcomer, is also and exactly weighed in the course of a few days, and stamped with his correct number. Just as if he had been subjected to a formal test, of his strength, speed and temperament. A stranger comes from a distant school, better dressed, with trinkets in his pockets, with airs of grandeur and pretensions. An older boy says to himself, "It's no use, we'll find out tomorrow." What did he do, is the divine question that haunts men, and transpires every false reputation. A fop may sit in any chair in the world, and not be distinguished by his hour, from Homer and Washington, but there must never be doubt, about the respective capacity of human beings. Pretense may sit still, but it cannot act. Pretense never feigned an act of true greatness. Pretense never wrote an Iliad, never drove back Xerxes, never Christianized the world, never abolished slavery. The amount there is of virtue seems complete. The amount there is of goodness, is the reverence it commands. All demons respect virtue. The lofty sect, the generous, the devout, will always instruct and command mankind. Never a sincere word was entirely lost, never a magnanimity fell to the ground, if there is not some heart that greets and accepts unexpectedly. A man passes for what he is worth, for what is engraved on his face, in his form, in his fortune and in letters of light. It is of no use for him to dissemble, of no use for him to boast. There is confession in the looks of our eyes, in our smiles, in our greetings, and in our handshakes. His sin overshadows him, spoils all his good impression. Men do not know that they do not trust him, but they do not trust him. His vice puts spectacles on his eye, cuts mean lines on his cheek, pinches his nose, puts the mark of the beast on the back of his neck, and writes, "O fool, fool," on the forehead of a king. On the forehead of a king. If you don't want to be known to do something, don't do it. Never can a man play the fool, in the drift of a desert, but every grain of sand will seem to see. He may be a solitary diner, but he can't keep his foolish counsel. The broken complexion, the smarmy look, the ungenerous acts and the lack of due knowledge, all is talk. Can a chimpanzee be mistaken for Xenophon or Plato? Confucius exclaimed, "How can he hide from a man?" On the other hand, the hero does not fear, that if he conceals the confession of a just and courageous act, it will go unnoticed and unloved. One knows it himself and commits himself to the sweetness of peace and the nobility of the end, which in the end, will prove to be a better proclamation of it, than the account of the incident. Virtue is adherence in action to the nature of things, and the nature of things makes it prevail. It consists in a perpetual substitution of being for appearance, and with sublime propriety, God is described as saying, "I alone." The choice conveyed by these remarks is to be, and not to appear. Let us accept, let us remove our pretensions from the divine circuits, let us unlearn our wisdom of the world, let us lean on the power of the Lord, and let us learn that only the truth enriches and magnifies. If you visit your friend because you have to apologize for not having visited him, and wasting his time and affronting your own act, visit him now. Make him feel that the highest love has come to see him in you, his lowest organ. Or why should you torment yourself and your friend, with secrets of self-reproach, for not having attended him or congratulated him with gifts and greetings? So far, ordinary men apologize for men. They bow their heads, excuse themselves with neat reasons and pile up appearances, because the substance is not so. We are full of these superstitions of sense, of the cult of magnitude. We call the poet inactive, because he is not president, merchant or janitor. We worship an institution, and we do not see that it is based on our thinking. But the real action is in the moments of silence, in the periods of our life. It is not in the visible facts of our choice of a vocation, our marriage, our acquisition of an office and the like. But it is, in a silent thought of the way as we walk, in a thought that reviews our whole way of living, and says, "So you have done, but it was better this way." And all our subsequent years, as servants, serve and wait upon this, and, according to their ability, execute his will. This revision or correction is a constant form which, as a tendency, presents itself throughout our whole life. Man's aim, the aim of these moments, is to make the light of day shine through him, and to allow the law to pass through his whole being without obstruction. So that at whatever point of his doing, there falls its eye truly informing his character, whether it be his diet, his home, his religious forms, his society, his joy, his vow, or his opposition. Now, it is not homogeneous, but heterogeneous, and the ray does not pass through it. There are no complete lights, but the eye of the observer is bewildered, detecting many different tendencies, and a life not yet unified. Why should we strive with our false modesty, to belittle the man that we are, and the way of being that has been assigned to us? A good man is content, and though I love and honor Epaminondas, I do not wish to be him. I deem it fairer to love the world of this hour, than the world of his hour. Nor can you, if I am sincere, excite me to the least uneasiness by saying, "He did act, and you stand still." I see that action is good when it is necessary, and standing still is so too. Epaminondas, if he were the man I consider, would have stood still with joy and peace, if his lot had been mine. Heaven is great, and accommodates all modes of love and strength, why should we be meddlesome and superserious? Action and inaction are the same for the true. One piece of tree is cut for a weather vane, and another for a bridge crossbeam. The virtue of wood is evident in both. I do not wish to undo the soul, the fact that it is here, proves to me that the soul needed an organ here. I should not assume the position of host, seething and dodging with my intemperate apologies. Be modest and imagine that my presence here is impertinent, less impertinent than the presence of Epaminondas or Homer, and that the soul did not know its own needs. Besides, without reasoning about it, I have no discontent. The good soul nourishes me, and opens to me every day various magazines of power and enjoyment. I will not meanly decline the immensity of good, because I have heard that it has come to others, moreover, in another form. Why should we recoil from the name of action, in a trick of the senses? Nothing else do we know, that the ancestor of all action is a thought. The poor mind seems to be no less, that it has an outward badge, some diet of people, or a Quaker's coat, or a Calvinistic prayer meeting. As well as a philanthropy, or a large donation, or a high office, or at any rate, some wild and contrasted action, which testifies that it is something. The rich mind lies in the sun and sleeps, and its nature is to think, it is to act. If we are to have great actions, let us have our own. Every action is of infinite elasticity, and the smallest admits of being inflated with celestial air, until it eclipses the sun and the moon. Let us seek peace through fidelity. Let me perform my duties, for I must enter into the scenes and philosophy, of Greek and Italian history, before I have justified myself to my benefactors. How dare I read the campaigns of Washington, if I have not answered the letters of my own correspondents? Is not that a just objection to much of our reading? It is a pusillanimous desertion of our work, to contemplate that our neighbors are spying. Byron says of Jack Bowding, he knew not what to say, and so he swore. I can say it of our absurd use of books, he knew not what to do, and so he read. I can think of nothing to fill my time with, and it seems to me that Brand's life is a very extravagant compliment to Brand or General Washington. My time should be as good as theirs, my works, and my network of relationships, as good as theirs, or any of theirs. Rather, let me do my job too, let other slackers, if they wish, be able to compare my texture with theirs, and find it identical, at best. This overestimation of the possibilities of Paul and Pericles, this underestimation of ours, comes from an oversight, from the fact of an identical nature. Bonaparte knew but one merit, and he rewarded in the same way the good soldier, the astronomer, the good poet, the good gambler. The poet uses the names of Caesar, Termilon, Bonduca and Belisarius. The painter uses the conventional story of the Virgin Mary, Paul and Peter. Therefore, he does not refer to the nature of these accidental men, these serial heroes. If the poet writes a real drama, then L's Caesar, and not Caesar's actor. Then, in the very attention of thought, emotion so pure, wit so subtle, movement so rapid, growing, extravagant. And the heart so large, self-sufficient and fearless that, on the waves of his love and hope, he can lift all that is considered solid and precious in the world, palaces, gardens, money, navies, kingdoms. Marking his own incomparable worth, by the contempt he casts upon these distractions of men. All these are his, and by the power of these, he awakens the emotions so that man believes in God, and not in names, places and persons. The great soul incarnated in some form of poor, sad, unmarried woman, in some afflicted Joan, goes out to the service and sweeps the chambers and mops the floors. And its diurnal influences, will not be muffled or concealed, but by sweeping and mopping, will instantly appear supreme in beautiful actions, summit and splendor of human life. And all the people will pick up mops and brooms, until lo and behold, suddenly the great soul has consecrated itself in some other form, and has performed some other action, and that is now the flower and the head of all nature. We are the photometers, we are the irritable gold leaf, and the foil, measuring in the accumulations of the subtle element. We know the real effects of true fire, through each of its millions of disguises. If you liked this audiobook, and you want to listen to other similar ones, check out the video description. Thank you for your visit.